Get the whole story.
Welcome back. You're watching Global Today. And of course, we're looking at the current state of play in our country regarding the demonstrations and also the negotiations that are ongoing with new, fresh demands that is coming from Azimio side regarding the bipartnership, I should say, that approach that should be framed by Parliament. And he is taking special umbrage with some of the issues that are not really addressed, but the president has actually cherry-picked on IBC alone. As you can see here on the editorial cartoon inside the Daily Nation today, fuel and unga, cost of living are some of the pertinent issues that Kenyans also are demanding to be addressed. And this is what Raila Odinga has picked. And we're looking at the art of negotiation and diplomacy regarding the current stalemate that we're in as a country, holding court this morning with Professor Noah Midamba, who is a foreign policy and defense expert, also a partner with GLOSEP. We have also Dr. Hassan Kanenje, who is the director at the Horn Institute of Strategic Studies. We do have with us as well Professor Peter Kagwanja, who is the CEO of Africa Policy Institute, and Ahmed Ashi, a governance and policy analyst. Professor Noah Midamba, we promised to circle back with you on what is really right up your alley when it comes to diplomacy. And we've seen the good offices, just a moment, we've seen the good offices of the church. We have also the Senator Andrew Kunz as well, has played a big role in bringing and brokering sort of, a peace deal that everyone is really looking forward to it working. But with these new revelations, with these new demands from Raila Odinga and a threat to go back to the streets, what do we do?
Well, let me come up at it from a global standpoint, and then narrow it down to really what I think we ought to do as a country and what it has taken. This is what we need to understand. Number one, let's not focus on Raila Ruto. This is bigger. This issue is bigger than Raila and Ruto. There is a problem in Africa. The problem of governance. Dibala had the opportunity when I came from America in 2012. I was asked to chair a committee of experts on national value. And we put together a document, Dibala, that need to reflect in the laws of Kenya that we have on the governance that we have in the country, among members of parliament, among cabinet members and everything. Mm-hmm. But these are documents that are in the government archive that can be found. There is top 5 governance issue which is impacting the entire continent of Africa, which Kenya is not an exception. First is a tendency to restrict the press. Dismal press is playing a very dismal role in our governance. Proliferation of restrictive laws so that authoritarian regime are increasingly exposing what is happening, the legal framework of the country in order to continue. Entrenched leadership, abuse of term. We know that 2015, former president of Burundi tried to increase his term, and that did not happen. But the question is, Burundi is one of the poorest countries. It's the poorest country in the continent of Africa. Mm-hmm. So if the question is to increase his term, what sort of value was it going to bring? I can understand what Paul Kagame is doing because Paul Kagame is increasing value. There is weak regional human right We have human rights, but the governments in almost in uniform are trying to shut down human rights elsewhere. And lastly, economic competitiveness. The Africa, if you compare with the rest of the world, Europe is trading with each other at 75%. Asia is trading with each other at over 50%. Africa is trading with each other at less than 15%. So what you're looking at, particularly in the East Africa community, is everybody wants their own airline. Every country wants to have their own airline, instead of us having a regional airline. Here's what is at stake in this country. Kenya passport is ranked among top 10 in Africa. Kenya is ranked number 4 by Hensley Partner among the wealthiest countries in Africa. Kenya passport holder can travel to 72 countries. That is 32% of the world country without visa. Kenya is number 7 largest GDP in Africa. Kenya is the most dominant GDP in East Africa and the most dominant per capita in East Africa. There are investors here from the rest of the world that are creating job opportunity for everyone. I had a talk last week with one of the investors that has $8 billion, that has invested $8 billion in the continent of Africa. Their headquarters is here. They're planning to move their headquarters to Rwanda. And these are real things that is happening in the world as we are sitting down here. So it is not Raila Ruto. It is Kenya is at stake for losing significantly what we're talking about. We're looking at the Kenya currency right now, vis-a-vis Kenya currency and the South Africa rand are the most widely used currency in the continent of Africa. But very soon, other currencies are coming. So Kenya has a stake. Kenya's move during Uhuru's time as a leader of East Africa, with President Uhuru traveling all over, begin from Moi to Kibaki to Uhuru. You know, we become the leader of East Africa. We have become a room for investors. And our standard of education is higher, and the investment we put in education is higher. All these are at stake. And therefore, Dibal, my recommendation is for the president to do, and Honorable Raila Odinga, to do two things. Appoint two people, two key people, one representing the government, one representing the opposition. I recommend that we appoint Kalonzo Musyoka to represent the opposition and Mudavadi to represent the government, such that this discussion which just begin does not vanish, because the ground is fertile for a major catastrophe that our friend Haji here was talking about. One has to go to and see the memorial in Rwanda. And I've done that. I've taken my students there to watch it. We don't want that to happen in Kenya. And it can happen very soon and very easily. It can get out of control because of what we have seen, the way that those young people invaded President Uhuru's farm and what they did. They can do it to each other, and we can do it on the street. And then whatever we have built for years, the state where we are is going to go down on smoke.
Dibal, to him,
Please.
what is the end game? I mean, if we have Kalonzo, we have whoever else who can be appointed, when they sit down, what do we see ourselves as Kenyans as the end game? Because it's good. That's you.
Let me just mention why I said this.
No, not why. I am very specific.
The end game
Yes.
is that you need rational people You need rational people
that comes from school.
No. My point is for the president and for Honorable Raila to freeze not now. Don't pass that at each other. Freeze right now and have an organized way, process, and then bring that information back on the table to the two people and say this is the way we need to go. I'm talking about that strategy.
Yes, but you have not answered my question. What kind of a Kenya do we want to see after this process?
Can I answer that?
Yes, please.
What we want to see is that when you put red ants and black ants into a bottle, they hardly fight. But when you shake the bottle, they kill each other. Something is shaking the bottle of the country. What is it? It is about power, Debal. I have to be honest about it. The question that the opposition has posed is that Mr. Ruto did not win the elections. Excuse me. I'm fasting, that's why I'm in this condition. Did he win the elections? Did the Electoral Commission give the right judgment? And did the Supreme Court's judgment, was it legitimate? It said that he won by 200,000 votes. The opposition is saying now that there is something that they have that says that that's not true. Now, from the position that I spoke from the beginning, and my sister senior is a witness, I opposed mass action because I knew where it was going to take us. I knew there's no question about what is going to happen. Let me just finish.
You're not answering.
I'm answering it. I'm coming to it. That is the question. The question is about power, and what the political paradigm that we have in this country of the first across the post, right, does not ensconce how we're going to rule each other, especially when there are questions about who won this election. Now, either we do two things. Either the Honorable Raila Odinga and Mr. Ruto decide that, okay, if this is going to be the case, this country needs a proper bleeding, and therefore we can learn our mistakes from the bleeding. Or we use wisdom and say, oh, you know, this political culture of the English that brought it here, Wangari Maathai used to say that, you know, they told us, God rest our soul, that before the white man came here, that we knew nothing, we had no God, we had no education, that we had nothing. And therefore, when we were born, we were customized into a information that was given to us that made us who we are. Right? That's the problem. We have a political structure that does not bring the people of this country together. The founding fathers did not create a nation. They created tribal movements in this country. Therefore, I am asking to answer directly this question. I think that the solution that I have is that for there to be direct talks between Mr. Odinga and Mr. Ruto. That's my view.
But is it different from what we have done? Because you can understand my. I mean,
Could we hear from?
I'm begging to be told.
So they've not really answered the question. What is the end game? Can we just get it in a one-liner?
Kagwanje,
Yeah.
let's unify Kenya. Let's get rid of corruption in the country so that the government is not a cash cow for people to eat. It is a place to go and provide service to the people.
No, you're not answering his question.
You are not answering my question. In this particular process, let's not talk about the big things. We have Kibaki's agenda was very simple: new constitution,
yes,
economic upliftment, and ending corruption.
Yeah.
He gave us a constitution. At his time, he gave us the economy, failed on corruption. Uhuru Kenyatta came to power. He promised four pillars. We ended up in poverty, food security at the end of the day. He gave us infrastructure, a lot of it, and good ones.
He was a great president.
He was a great president. He allowed the freedoms to go on.
Yeah.
We talked the way we wanted to talk. And the economy rose, but we had debts.
What do you think?
Now, let me finish.
What do you think the opposition?
The question is, from this discussion, and I want to say this: what is the end game? What is it that we want?
No, what do you think is what they want?
Yeah.
No, it's not my turn.
Ibal,
My turn
you
is
need to
coming.
moderate this session.
No, it's okay.
It's becoming disorderly.
No, it's not
okay.
disorderly. It's good
It's fine.
actually to
Yeah.
speak. Yeah.
Let it move on. Go on.
Yes. The constitutional question was settled in the last election by the Supreme Court ruling. So the constitutional question, as things stand, that is something that was settled. There are two issues that are outstanding. What we're having right now is a political question and an economic question. The political question has to do with perceptions. Has to do with perceptions of our institutions and whether they are just and fair.
Correct.
And that perception cannot be litigated in the absence of a form of engagement or negotiations, because politics can never be solved in courts.
Yes.
We've always seen that. Remember, politicians are the ones that make laws. That's why we call them legislators. So politics gives birth to laws and gives birth to constitution, including the current one we have. And so that recognition, has to be there for us to understand that what we're facing right now, on one hand, is a political question. On the other hand, is an economic question. We have a tendency generally in Kenya of trying to undermine or minimize the grievance of each other, and either try to tribalize it, sectarianize it, regionalize it, in ways that is actually not reflective of what is happening. 8 million Kenyans did not vote in the last election, which means those 8 million Kenyans were enough, if they voted for someone, to have had actually another person as president, easily, or at least will have gotten the majority votes. So there are a lot of Kenyans, of course, who didn't show up to vote. But once you are elected as a leader, whether you're in the position or in government, you're supposed to represent all of
The
these
people.
views and all of these opinions.
Correct.
Now, to the extent that we don't seem to acknowledge each other, and we seem to try and minimize each other's grievances, the way
Right.
we look at it, is part of what has actually created a stalemate. Now, unfortunately, and as I mentioned at the beginning, doing politics is easy. Being a statesman
It's very
is
hard.
is extremely hard. But moments of crisis are the ones that calls for statesmanship from both sides. But also statesmanship and civic responsibility from citizens at the same time. Government is also us. It's not just those who are holding the levels of power. Are we playing our civic responsibility? Now, for those who are in power, they are in power in trust. We've entrusted them to hold that power. And being in power, sometimes we look at power as just being in government. No. Those who are in the position, they're also in power, have a responsibility. And so, where do we want to go from here? Now, the so-called Building Bridges initiative was an attempt that was also opposed
Yes.
by some Kenyans,
Yes.
a good number of Kenyans,
Yes.
and it failed, because it was seen as not having, first of all, been constitutionally constituted, or rather didn't have a proper constitutional basis.
Right.
And then it was also seen as some kind of an elite pacting
Yes.
that left out the citizenry.
Correct.
But I think, while I don't disagree with a lot of things, for instance, in the BBI, I think the principle and the philosophy of trying to solve problems every 5 years is a good idea. Now, that doesn't mean that the BBI package was a good package, but that kind of discussion is something we always have. We can't live in a country where we pretend, for instance, the sense of ethnic nationalisms do not exist, because they are real. So when there is a protest or the president has been voted in, we can't reduce it, for instance, to 2 communities, because 2 communities can't make you president in this country. When there are protests, neither can we try to, for instance, Luonize it, because that's absolutely not true.
It's not true.
It is not true. And I always want to challenge anybody to take a pulse of the country by conducting a poll. Conduct a poll, scientific polls. How do you feel about this? Whether it's about demonstrations, or let's say about some of the grievances the demonstrators are trying to make. Is it a reserve or secluded to a certain section, or is it something that's widespread? And if that is the problem, when it comes to, for instance, demonstrations have also been hurting the economy significantly, And someone asked me a question, why some people are actually demonstrating. And some of them are, abusing that and becoming civil disobedience, kind of, and which takes us down in a dangerous path. But also, when you look at a lot of those people in the streets, when you're saying why cannot go to work, it's like sometimes being the Caesar's wife. You're asking if they don't have bread, why can they eat ugali? No, they have neither, so they don't have a job. So a jobless person and a poor person has nothing to lose by their own poverty.
Rice.
You understand? And so unless we're actually honest and say we look at each other as brothers who belong to this country and say, fine, we differ politically, perhaps I may feel that you didn't even win fairly.
Yes.
But can we be able to have a discussion
about the
for
way
the common
forward.
good, of the way forward of the country?
Kagwanja.
But the moment we start brinkmanship, it becomes dangerous, because even if 10% of the country is determined to oppose you, for instance, it can cause a lot of havoc to a country. And that is kind of the situation that we actually want to avoid.
Well, I wanted just to follow up with the issue that you raised, that it is good for this country to actually be resolving or asking questions after every 5 years, right? But the problem with that philosophy is that should we be asking the same question after every 5 years?
Actually,
if we need a review of the same question after every 5 years, I think there's a big problem.
I think you actually didn't get my point. I said the argument for what I call BBLists, was that, well, we need to find a framework that can resolve the problem of us getting into situations every 5 years.
Correct.
Because the current framework, and if anybody is honest and is God-fearing, and I'll repeat this, and this is the month of Ramadan for those of us who are Muslims, if anybody, whether you go to church, you go to the temple, you go to the synagogue, there's one synagogue there at the University of Nairobi.
Yes.
If you're honest with yourself, the current framework that we have,
it's not working for us.
Is it working for us?
Kagwanja, I want to hear Kagwanja.
Is it working for us? It's not about, as I mentioned, the constitutional questions are settled. The election is over. The current framework, is it working for us?
It's a good question.
Does
for
it
Kagwanja
make every Kenyan feel,
But
for instance, represented?
If you may just make it more limpid for us, you can tell us what is a framework?
No.
What is the
it's
framework?
A framework of governance. Is how the country agrees to be able to live together. Remember, we are a state that is trying to become a nation state. We are many nations in this part of the world. We did not sign up to be part of Kenya or to be part of Tanzania. We were put together by, arbitrarily in 1884, 1885. And so being able to negotiate on how we can live together and also recognize each other.
Thank you.
So that those who are in leadership can be recognized, those who are outside can also be acknowledged.
Let's listen to
All right, I can see Kagwanja is very pensive.
let's listen to the oracle.
Maybe you should tell us also, where do we start as a nation that is not really a nation, but as a state that is, sojourning to be a nation?
Well, the only nation state we have in Africa is Somalia. Because historically, culturally, the region,
and they fail.
The Somali, and yet it is the only failed state in Africa which is trying to
look for a state.
Yes. And two, we normally talk about the rest of Africa as being in search of a nation.
Yes.
Kenya is in search of a nation. That's why we talk about nation building.
Yes.
For the Somali, they're in search of a state.
Yes.
Because they are a nation without a state. But that's not the debate I wanted to get into.
Go ahead.
I asked a simple question to my brother, Professor Midaba, and Hashi came to the rescue and limped more. He didn't answer the question as it is supposed to be.
Go ahead.
Because we have been into this game. I've sat in boardroom at the highest level to ask the same question, because we were here in 2007.
Yes.
And I left South Africa to come here to basically answer this question. How do we turn the cycles of violence into cycles of regeneration, self-regeneration? So that, as he's saying, every 5 years, we don't talk about protest, we talk about progress.
Yes.
And there's a difference between protest and progress. And therefore, the solution we found in 2007, 2008, from that whole process, we agreed we need to have a constitution, first and foremost, because as a democracy, since 1992, we didn't have a constitution. And we agreed on a constitution. Two, we need arbiters whenever we have a dispute. and we create a Supreme Court. Even a constitutional court was agreed upon to resolve issues on which we don't agree. So after that, 2013, 2017, we had disagreement. And I have not seen progress. What am I seeing as an end game to this? First, accept the immutables, what cannot be changed. One, we have an election that did not deliver what was acceptable to all Kenyans. Constitutionally and legally, it is a constitution, it's an election that delivered a president who is legitimate, according to our laws, and that we cannot change. Ruto is legitimately elected according to our laws. Even if he didn't, people keep on talking about 200 votes, what happened? That's nonsense. Even if he had got one vote, our constitution provides 50% plus one. Just one vote was enough. And that's our law. But what is our reality? Our reality is that we want a more inclusive process. We want a country where we feel more included, where the 8 million plus the 6 million of Raila Odinga makes 14 million people, and therefore outnumber by far William Ruto's number. We want a more inclusive society. So that's an agenda on the table. The end game is whatever discussion we are having now from this process must deliver us as a country from this idea of a minoritarian system where the minority governs. That's one of the thing, the end game. The second end game is in these cycles of power sharing, elite power sharing, every 5 years we have Raila going to the streets, then being called for negotiations, brokering a power sharing deal, and then the path to the next election, which put us on the same rail, and we have Saseko. And that's where we find ourselves in April 2023. That we are where we were in January 2008, where we were in January, February 2018. Now, so how do we get out of this? We need a very strong opposition. And a strong opposition that is officially built to be strong. Not the kind of the Wandai majority leader who goes to talk in parliament and nobody listens. We have never had a paper, a white paper or whatever, from an opposition that states a position, because we don't have a strong opposition. The opposition is the weakest link in our democracy, and we need that. That is now the next end game. The end game, this particular debate must give us a strong opposition that holds the government to account on issues of corruption, on issues of governance, on issues of press freedom, on issues of all the rights that we have given to ourselves. Finally, and the third, is what Hashu was talking about. And this is where we are doing the woolly business, going round and round and round. It is the economy. And this is what Clinton was saying. It is the economy. Stupid. It is the economy. Why is it the economy? Because none of our governments, from the Kibaki time through Uhuru time and now in Ruto's time, I'm not seeing a serious analysis of the problems of our economy. I know Raila is talking about cost of living. He's not even telling us a situation. He's simply taking us to the street without giving us a... Let me finish. Actually, don't be in a hurry. Because the economy has been transformed. We moved from the first industrial revolution, the second industrial revolution, and the third industrial revolution. Now we're in the fourth industrial revolution. What is this doing to our economy, which we need to adjust to ensure that we carry the rest of society together? The fourth industrial revolution is creating a very large underclass. People who have no jobs, people who cannot be incorporated in the economy because of the way it is structured, and the people who are not having even a meal per day. Like our brothers Muslims, they are fasting throughout the year, not in the 1 month of Ramadan. For them, they are almost perpetually fasting because they have nothing to eat. And this is the underclass that is a danger to our society. Correct. And this underclass happen to be young people, the youth. Therefore, our youth bulge is turning into a doom, not a boon. And therefore, our overclass is split into two. They are populists, in both ways. They are populists, and they are populists for the underclass, and they are not offering solution. Agriculture has collapsed. It is no longer our main source of income, and it is the one employing over 80% of our population. Safaricom and other ICT companies are meeting our taxes. Okay, so we have marginalization not by anybody, but by the nature of the technology we have adopted. And this is what Karl Marx was talking about in the 19th century. This is what other scholars, John Locke and others were talking about. The birth of capitalism created a class. How do you empower the class that has been underprivileged? In the 21st century, Kenya is not addressing that question. Therefore, when we go to the streets, in terms of the cost of living, we are making a problem. We are making a mistake. We are not telling the underclass how their children are going to be employed, how they themselves are going to be involved in production, because they are marginalized by technology. How do we involve them in production? How do we ensure that the economy is distributed across the stratum, the various stratas of society? This is what is not coming out.
Thank you.
So the outcome of this negotiation process must be a blueprint, call it a white paper or whatever, that help us to understand in the next 50 years, how are we going to ensure that the underclass is empowered?
There's two ways in which you can know the truth. One is from your enemy who loses his temper, and one from a person who loves you. That is Antisthenes, the great philosopher from Greece. Now, Debal, the question that has come out here, if I can encapsulate it, is whether or not that the political structure and the constitutional system of government we have is appropriate for us. That's the first thing. It's a very important question. Is it that the first across the post system a thing that is going to help this country, or is it going to send it back into civil strife? I put it to you, Debal, that I've always argued, and I believe that my learned friend there on the right, Mr. Hassan Khanenjo, was touching it, was that we need a system of government that represents this country's political will. As my learned senior said, there are 14 million people out there who don't agree with the constitutional system that we have. They might not think of what constitutional system we want, but they see something very wrong in what's going on. That's the second. The third thing is, Debal, we have to make sure that our institutions, if the Electoral Commission and the Supreme Court, in the judgment of the public court or the court of public opinion, had done the right thing, there would be no support for Raila's mass action. It is not true in political economy to have one man to turn the point of histories of a country. There must be underlying sociological facts that produce this individual. Why is it that Hashi cannot call for mass action? When he does it, it means that he has fundamental social power in this country, and that there are underlying political, economic, and sociological facts that support it. And the fourth thing about is that the ethnic character of the demonstrations was not Luo. There are a number of 3, 4, 5 in the ethnic groups. It was a conglomeration of this underclass that my senior learned is talking about, that is hell-bent on some kind of revolution. Whether it's going to be conservative or it's going to be progressive, we don't know. But the political elite in this country, Debal, are playing footsie with this republic. You can just see, just yesterday, Mr. Odinga speaking about going back to the trenches, and Mr. Ruto in Rwanda speaking about institutions and the rule of law. The institutions and the rule of law are supposed to serve the republic. The institutions and the rule of law are not abstract concepts in the air. They have to be for the common good. The law must have the moral and ethical basis, Debal. There's no question in my mind that we need institutions in the rule of law. Without that, we're nothing. We're finished. Correct? But we have an institution, for example, the Director of Public Prosecutions. We have that, right? A district attorney in New York has taken and put a former president under cuff, Debal. A district attorney who's black.
Yeah,
Why?
we shall look at it.
I'm just using it as an example.
Sure.
Let me come to my point. It's an example of an institution that's working. Yesterday, the guys who had problems, who were put in police and put into custody, were released by the DPP. That's our institution. It's supposed to just follow the law, isn't it? Debal, if our institutions are not working for the common good, and they're not protecting this republic, and they're not bringing people together, we have to change them. We have to change them so that it accommodates it. And I agree with my learned friends. President Ruto is the president of this country. Wait, and he cannot be changed unless there's an election in this country. But
we need to wind up on
must
it.
represent the 14 million people in a system, a constitutional system in this government that shares power. There's no question about that in my mind.
Before we come to you, Noah, so the whole key, if I may here, and just take, Hashi, if you may just sit up so that we can capture you nice on camera. The fact that we're in this morass is a constitutional problem. Can we say it's a constitutional problem?
Yes. It's not.
Okay, we agree that we have a wonderful constitution.
It's a political problem.
If it's a political problem, where is it emanating? Is it not from the constitution? Because what you're really talking about is that we have such a powerful president, and the winner takes all
is a problem.
Is a problem.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying. It's a constitutional problem. Then we need now maybe to just look in the mirror and like man in the mirror and say, yes, we have a wonderful constitution down through the stream of time.
Why
10
is it
years
not
it has
working?
been. All other facets of it are working, but there is one which is like the linchpin that is holding the constitution, which is not working, which is the first past the post. All we hear about talks and, all our electoral systems and the problems with it, can we solve it by going to a referendum to amend the constitution? Because this is not what people are really talking about. If the president will really come and bring a memorandum that we need, as I said before, we need a strong opposition, is in a very nuanced way telling us, yes, there is a problem that we need to fix, and we need to look at the constitution. People who are drafters of this constitution, they need to go back to the boardroom.
Here's my point. I need my colleagues, to understand that the issue of Ruto presidency should not be debated.
That one, we are past that junction.
That's a red line.
Moving forward.
We have closed that one.
Yeah, close it and it is done. Let's move to the issue that matters, which you are talking about. The constitution needs to be amended. One of the things that happened, one of the most beautiful things that happened with 2010 constitution is we have a devolved government. And the intended purpose of devolved government was to take the big chunk of the central government and give it to the people, such that we can save job development in that area, we can save other strategic development that will then bring the country together. We have not done that. We are debating that every 5 years. And until that is done, the issue about where disparity in terms of regional development is going to continue in this country. And therefore, people will not see the central government that bring us together as our government. This is the debate, a legitimate debate that we must try. So BBI as an aspect and touch on aspect of what can bring this together. What is wrong with us moving ahead and getting that done, like our friend Kanenji?
I think the courts made their pronouncement regarding the BBI. If we just bring back BBI also, I think is unpalatable for most Kenyans that they think we've moved on. Could we just start on a clean, fresh plate by just steamrolling another process that will begin with reviewing the constitution, instead of really talking about BBI.
You see,
BBI is done and dusted.
Yes, that one is, and rightly so.
Can I just hear from Kanenji, please?
Okay. Mr. Kanenji.
I do agree that a lot of Kenyans are fatigued by discussions on BBI, except BBI-nomics, is still haunting us to date, because I think some of the questions that were raised have not exactly or never really solved, and that of course also puts us in the current quagmire that we are finding ourselves in. And one thing that's going to be critical is each country responds to crisis in a unique way, and depending on the peculiarities of that crisis. If 2017 precipitated the BBI, 2022 does not necessarily have to turn into BBI, but perhaps the current contestations should make us relook into our entire structures and our entire system of governance and ruling ourselves. We are a sovereign country, but our sovereignty is always going to get breached, and we're always going to have people interfere in it if we don't seem to be managing our own affairs properly, because we're way too important for the world. It's not just for ourselves. We are too important as a country for the world. And what this is going to take is an honest approach to the problems we face, but also reducing selfishness within our political elites. So that, because the perception and part of the position against BBI was also created by the perception that, or the belief that people are looking for positions and not reflecting perhaps the will of the citizens. I think it's going to be important that that kind of perception, of course, is corrected. And so whatever framework we're able to build, it does not mean we're going to build in 2023. It may be perhaps come to fruition in 2027. But for heaven's sake, our discussions need to be done. And the reason why this is also important is 2010 we get a beautiful constitution. We devolved,
excuse me,
constitutionally we have a devolved government, but so did we also devolve corruption, for instance. Now, part of the challenges we are actually facing are also because of corruption. And corruption, at least my assessments, seem to be worse at county levels than even the national government. And these people are making their own regions even poorer, because of that. And so the discussion should not just be limited to the interests of the political elites, but also when it comes to the goods and services are going to be provided to citizens, because that has contributed to the kind of situation we're finding our citizens in. So it has to be a little bit broader, not narrow. But then we need to have the right people. And that has nothing to do with education. It has everything to do with wisdom. And those people who've lived in this country long enough, and who lived in this continent long enough, we are always a spark away from a genocide or conflict. And if that is not a recognition of yours, is a problem. I can just remember, ask you to look at what happened on January 6th in Washington, D.C., literally, in a country that's been a democracy for 300 years. To come that close to the precipice, it tells you that democracy is something that is very delicate, always has to be managed, always has to be negotiated, and as they say in America, they're always working towards a more perfect union, because it's not there yet. And so must we.
Indeed. All right, we bring it to a close with you, Peter Kagwanja.
I agree. And I want to start where he has stopped, which is that democracy is always work in progress. And we, in fact, we accept it's work in progress, then 5 years review of our democracy is not something that's wrong. It's only that we have never provided a platform for that. And therefore it's protests, demonstrations, civil disobedience, and then teetering on the brink, which force us to rethink our system, which is not the best way of doing things. So I think the country need to set a day, or a team, or whatever, to audit our democracy. That need to be somewhere. Now,
but where do you begin?
Now, let's start now. And now that we are at it,
where do we begin with auditing this democracy?
Because that one you have to create a platform for that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes.
Where do you begin?
You start. I mean,
after creating the platform, where do you begin?
Where we have started where we have started now. I mean, or what we have done, the tradition in our democracy that has emerged from the 1990s is that every 5 years we do audit, but we audit under distress. That's what we do. And we have made changes. And I have described those changes as Kenya's quiet revolution.
That you've mentioned, yes. But I'm asking, yes, now that you agree that our democracy needs tweaking, we need to
Let me,
to rethink about our where do we begin after constituting a team that will look into it? What will be the first issue?
Okay, let me state this. I am always persuaded by the simplicity of narration about the problems of our nation as articulated by our founding fathers. I've always found it fascinating that somebody would say ignorance, poverty, and disease are our problems. And therefore you address those issues in their simplicity, but also in their generality by way of looking at what do we need to end poverty, what do we need to end ignorance, and what do we need to end disease. Today, our problem is inclusivity, the problem of oversight, and the problem of extreme poverty. So we have not moved from the 60s. Inclusivity. Now let me start by inclusivity very quickly. We had 22,120,458 registered voters in 2022. Out of those, only 14,213,027 voters voted. Therefore, about 15 million of them did not vote. Right? 15 million. Yeah? No, 8 million did not vote. And therefore, when you tally the 8 million who did not, it is 7,907 for that one who did not vote. If you add those to the aggrieved section, which is Raila Odinga's 16 million, we are actually getting about 15 million because it's 14.85. That's approximately 15 million, which would call not just the majority, the super majority. Now, we said, as constituted by law and according to the way we vote, William Ruto is legitimately elected, even with one vote.
Yes.
And therefore we have a government and we have a legitimate government as by our law. But in terms of perception, Kenyans are asking, can we have a democracy where everybody at least feel included? 70%. And that's why we accepted this constitution. Why? Because it was voted by 70%. Nobody raises the question of the constitution. And I was the executive of the constitution from the government side. And we fought. We put everything that we could put. We did everything that needed to be done to get 70% for acceptability. So the first question, Dibar, is the inclusivity. And inclusivity is a perception question. We need to get that. The second is oversight. And oversight, which I said, is the opposition. We need a very strong opposition around which other lobbies will rally, whether it's civil society, intellectuals like ourselves, and everybody. Because if the government does not accept you, then you have somewhere else to go. Finally, how do we deal with the question of extreme poverty? Because we have moved from poverty in the 60s to the question of extreme poverty. And that's why I was talking about the economy and the way it is structured. We have a very small other class. It's J.M. Kariuki who said that we are not building a country of 10 million paupers
and 10 millionaires.
And 10 millionaires. Now we have even moved from there. We have 1 millionaire and the rest are paupers. This is where we are. And therefore, if we don't listen to that, that's why the other class.
Thank you.
Why these demonstrations have become, why these demonstrations or protests have become bloody, is because the poor are taking advantage of them.
Thank you. Right, Hashi, with all due respect, because I think we need to wind up on it. We spent almost 2 hours on this here. We need to look at other issues as well. So let's just move on and try and see. We begin maybe with the letters as well, in the history of America right now, where we're given to understand that the former President Donald Trump pleaded not guilty to 34 felony criminal charges of falsifying business records in Manhattan criminal court on Tuesday afternoon. Trump surrendered and was placed under arrest. If we just play the clips as well. Tuesday, before he was arraigned in a historic and an unprecedented court appearance in which the former president had the charges against him for the first time. While the arraignment was routine, the case is now poised to linger over Trump's 2024 candidacy as he fights the charges both in court and public. Prosecutors allege that Trump sought to undermine the integrity of 2016 election through a hush money scheme with payment made to women who claimed they had extramarital affairs with Trump. He has denied the affairs. Trump was part of an unlawful plan to suppress negative information, including an illegal payment of $130,000 that was ordered by the defendant to suppress the negative information that will hurt his campaign, according to the prosecutor. Trump repeatedly and fraudulently falsified New York business records to conceal criminal conduct that hid damaging information from the voting public during the 2016 presidential election, according to the charging documents. And of course, that is what we want to look on. Let me just begin with
It's my turn. Let's go this way. Well, the American democracy has shown us the power of its institutions, the power of its legal system, and the power that the American constitutional system of government has. The district attorney, Deval, convened something called a grand jury. These are peers who would sit down and be presented with the evidence about the wrongdoings or the criminality of Donald Trump. They overwhelmingly accepted that he had a case to answer. And the district attorney in New York, Deval, which is the home state of Donald Trump, issued a warrant of arrest. A warrant of arrest to a former president of the United States. It is a lesson to the world about the vibrancy of the American system of constitutional government. It is a signature, Deval, that says that in the United States that the rule of law is not only entrenched in the writings of the American Republic, it is in its very spirit. The founding fathers, Deval, when they wrote the paper, if I can call it that, the founding paper, in which, as I said, declared we the people. Deval I always feel a certain admiration, if not an overwhelming one, about how they conduct themselves when it comes to issues like this. You remember Mr. Trump was an unlikely winner of the election. Deval, the American people voted for him in a legitimate election and he became the president. And while he was president, Deval, he did things that went above the constitutional order of the office of the president. And he's paying for it now. And this is why, Deval, any president who comes to the United States knows that there is a line, a red line, that they cannot cross. It happened to Nixon, who sent burglars to a place called Watergate. And Deval, he resigned. Otherwise, he would have gone to jail. President Clinton, who lied on the public record, was impeached by the Senate of the United States, and he apologized for it. And now Donald Trump, Deval, by a district attorney. Deval, a district attorney is one of the 92 district attorneys in the United States. Deval, you know, we have a director of it's equal to the director of public prosecution here, who releases and brings people to the book based on the political structure of the day. And it's not only him, it's been all of them, from Charles Njonjo, who was the Attorney General, to today. Even though these institutions are entrenched in our Constitution. And therefore, what we learn as a view, from a political point of view, what we learn from this, Deval, that it is astonishing that Donald Trump is brought to a court like a common criminal and guarded by police officers. This was the commander-in-chief of the United States military. It's unprecedented, Deval. It is a signal, even to us, that that the government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the face of the earth.
Yes, no, Madama.
Deval, several lessons to learn here for us who are sitting in Kenya and the rest of the world. Americans regard their institution very seriously. Their national value, their civil right, their law, their constitution. very seriously. I have seen in the state of Washington where I was, where a judge attempted to bribe the police, and that judge went to jail for many years, and he lost his job, and he lost his family. I've seen it. I've seen it happen. What is at stake here, Dubal, is the presidency in United States, in their constitution. It is an institution that is highly regarded. And therefore the person in there must reflect the American people, must bring the American people together, and must remain above the law, must remain above board in their expectation, must reflect their value. Trump did not do that, Dubal. And Trump has demonstrated over and over again that he doesn't have the constitution, the value, the depth of understanding of American culture and American value. Based on what John Bolton said the other day, and John Bolton was his national security advisor, by incarcerating him, by handcuffing him, it brings all this ultra-right-wing movement that have supported him, because they focus on him as being prosecuted, wrongly being prosecuted. And there's a danger about that, Dubal. Is for this fellow to get back and win the Republican Party, candidacy for the president will be the worst thing that can happen in America. So my expectation is that they're going to checkmate him. They're going to make sure that he appears like this prosecutor has done, and release him to go back.
All right, thank you.
That would be the best thing.
Yeah, so we want to take a short break, but when we circle back, we pick up with you, Dr. Kanenje, because even for this, what will it really portend for Trump's polls? Because he has been leading, so to speak, just going by what the Ipsos released. Some 48% of self-described Republicans say they want Trump to be their party's presidential nominee, up from 44% in March 14 to 20 polls, and also some 19 back his closest rival, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, down from 30% last month. So is it going to really up his ante in terms of leading in the polls for the presidential candidate of the Republicans? We take a short break. When we circle back, we try and look at this and more. You're talking about a judge being also put in the slummers. Here we had Chitambwe as well. We're waiting to see if we'll be also going to the slummers at the end of the day. We take a short break.